Hey everyone, so I've been using Blender pretty regularly for about a year now, so I still remember what it was like to not know where anything is. In this beginner's guide, I made a list of everything in Blender modeling that I wouldn't want to work without, stuff that I use really regularly. Part 1 will go over the modeling tools over here, and then we'll go over selection, including the hotkeys that I think are really important to know. Then we'll go over the vertex, edge, and face, all this stuff in this menus. And then in part 4, we'll go over modifiers. The modifier is specifically good for modeling. So this is everything that I use. I hope that this helps you, and let's get right into it. Okay, first up is extrude. So you press E and you can extrude. Extrude does two things at once. It's a 2-in-1. So it duplicates geometry and then it moves it. Unlike every other tool, when you right click and extrude, which usually cancels everything, it looks like it cancels, but it's not canceled. So if you go into vertex mode and you move this, there's actually two faces on top of each other. Now, if you don't know, then it's annoying because you have all this duplicate geometry and you don't know where it came from. By the way, if you want to get rid of duplicate geometry, you can select everything, press M, and merge by distance. If you do know that the duplicate geometry is staying there, then it's helpful because you can use extrude as a way to duplicate in place. So you press E, right click, and then you can scale or rotate maybe on Z or something, whatever you want to do. Okay, so the next one is inset faces, and inset faces is really just a shortcut. So like how you could extrude, cancel, scale down, that's basically what inset faces is doing. So I can press I and it will inset the face. Inset face and extrude are really good in combination because if I want to make a indent here, I can extrude inwards. So that's a good combination of tools. So the next one is Bevel, and it can be a little confusing as a beginner knowing what Bevel does because like I'm selecting all these faces, I press Bevel, and then it's only applying to the edges. So from a first glance, it's like confusing because I selected a face, so why is the edge being beveled? Bevel only applies to edges. No matter what your selection is, it will apply all those edges in that selection. And what does it do to them? It takes an edge and it turns it into two or more edges. It will split the edge out evenly from the center. You can also turn it to vertices if you want to take a vertice and turn it into more. Something to be careful with bevel. If I bevel this edge right here, the edge didn't go all the way around. It was just one edge. So what it ended up needing to do to make it these three edges turn back into one edge is it needed to make triangles. So that created 3 triangles, and it also created this face which has 5 vertices. In Blender, you want to stick to quads if possible, because certain things will not work as well if you don't have 4 vertices for all your faces. For example, if I try to loop cut, it's not going to work. And the subdivision surface modifier also can look weird in cases where there's triangles and n-gons. For that reason, when I bevel, I try to keep it to an entire loop around the mesh. That way, no triangles are created that would make it harder for me to model in certain areas. Which brings me to my next one, which is the loop cut. And the loop cut will split basically something in half. It will cut all the way around in a loop. Loop cut will stop if there's a triangle because it doesn't know which way to go, and it will stop if there's an n-gon because it doesn't know which way to go to continue the cut. But as long as you have all quads, the loop cut will be very, very good at finding where the loop is. It's a little strange when you first use it. You don't know where the loop cut is appearing. Basically, you want to put your mouse to an edge, and that edge will determine the loop. It will go perpendicular to that edge. If I'm like selecting here, it doesn't know where I'm even selecting because I'm not anywhere near any edges. But if I want to cut vertically, I go to this edge because that's perpendicular vertically. If I want to cut horizontally, I go to this edge because that's horizontal. And that is how the loop cut decides where to highlight and give you where the loop is. Okay, so the next one is knife. And knife is really good for doing those imprecise cuts. They're not going to be geometrically even or symmetrical or anything like that, but you can cut in like weird looking ways to give a little bit more character. And in addition, if you want to cut a very specific shape into something, it's good too. Like if I wanted to create a keyhole here, then I'm literally just drawing on the mesh. So that's pretty nice to be able to do that. And knife also works really well with extrude because when you create that nice shape and you want to make it more pronounced, you can like extrude it in or extrude it out so that it's easier to see. Now, the knife tool, if you're doing something like this where you're creating like complicated shapes, will create some n-gons, so it is important to know that that is happening. And I also do use some of the cool little tricks with the knife tool. A, which will make it go in a specific direction. And then there's C, which will make it cut through the entire mesh. Almost like making a loop cut, but it doesn't have to be straight like that. So like, for example, and then I could do like this wild and crazy cut, and it will turn that wild and crazy cut into a loop. But when it's a wild and crazy cut, just be aware it will create some n-gons. And the next tool is polybuild, and I do not use this shit. I do not know what it's useful for. I do not understand. I do not use it. If there's something in the comments that you know and you like it, let me know. What is this useful for? Okay, so the next one is spin. So spin, you need to know a couple things. First of all, up here on the top left, that's like the direction of the spin, and you can see that making little shapes to show you which way it's going to spin. And the second thing, and probably most important to not get confused, is the spin tool revolves around wherever the 3D cursor is. If you want to move the 3D cursor, you can open this sidebar over here on the right, and then you can click view, and then it says 3D cursor. You can expand it, and you can move it all around. Okay, so as I was editing, I realized there's something I want to add about that. Let's say I have a face here that's not perfectly aligned to the grid, but I still want to make a spin from that face. What you can do is press Shift S and then do cursor to selected. Now the cursor has taken those weird numbers and found the center. And what you can do is, instead of having to do the math and all that, you can literally just press +2, and then it moved it 2 away from where it was. And then that is a great way to get a perfect spin, even if your geometry is not perfectly aligned to an integer. And the spin tool is really good because it can take like complex geometry, like the shape is weird, and it can spin it in a circle. The only other way to do that is with extrude. But if I were to try to extrude this, I'd have to do it like, what, 12 times just to get this shape. And it wouldn't be perfect because it wouldn't be rotating properly. So spin is very, very nice for making round things and taking geometry and spinning it in a circle. I do use spin a lot. The next one is smooth, and I do not use smooth. It's pretty nice looking. It looks like I might want to use it in some cases, but I just use other tools that do the same thing, so I don't use smooth. The next one is edge slide, and I do not actually select it in the toolbar. I just press G and then G again, and that's an edge slide. So basically what edge slide does is, for example, this point has 1, 2, 3, 4 edges. If I press G and then G again, wherever I move my mouse, it will take existing edges and move the vertice along the existing edges. So if I move my mouse to the right, it will move and stick to this edge, stick to the left edge, stick to the down edge, stick to the up edge. So it's pretty nice if you want to slide a vertice along an existing edge. And again, you just have to press G and then G again, and then that's how you get there. And this next one is shrink and fatten, and I do not use this. It makes things bigger. I don't know. I don't use it. And then shear, this is so confusing. I don't know what it's doing. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different handles. All of them do different things, and they're nice. They look useful, but to plan to use all of them when there's like 10 different things that you can hold, I don't really understand. I don't use that shit. And then finally, rip region is if you really want to take a vertice and rip it off and then create a hole in your mesh. Then maybe that you can fill again later. I don't use it. It's good to know it's there. Okay, so let's talk about some of the tool combinations. So one of the combinations is to do a loop cut and then bevel the loop cut. This is good because it doesn't create triangles and it creates more geometry. There's all kinds of things you can do with bevel. So for example, I could loop cut, scale it down, and then bevel. And now I have this cool like hourglassy shape. I talked about this, but Inset Extrude is pretty good for creating holes and things or indents and things. And if you want to get fancy with it, you can knife extrude if you want like some sort of fancy shape. Okay, so let's get into the selection tips. I'm not a big shortcut person. I don't like to do everything with shortcuts, but when it comes to selection, some things are super important you need to know with the shortcuts. And the first thing is A. You want to select everything. A is the best way to do it. Pretty important. You're going to want to do that a lot, so you don't want to go up here and blah, 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 blah. Another one that you need for a shortcut is control and clicking. So what control click does is it'll take the first vertice and it'll find the shortest path to the next vertice that you click. This is great for placing seams or selecting a path. It's really good. And you don't want to do that every single time. Go up here and then go find it in the menu. You want to control click, way better. Another one is alt click. Alt click will select a loop cut. Now selecting a loop cut will stop at n-gons. So if there's a polygon that has more than 4 faces somewhere, it will get lost and it will not complete the edge loop. So that's another reason where you want to be careful about having n-gons. It's really good for selecting a loop around something. You can also do that with faces too. So you can select loops of faces. The next one is L for link selection. And so as you can see, the monkey has these eyes and they're not selected. And the reason for that is the eyes are actually separate. There is no vertice connecting the eye to the monkey. So what link selection does by default is it selects everything that is connected by vertices and edges. Now, it's pretty nice because you can use these options here to make it link to different types of conditions. So let's say I want to make it so that it's easy for me to select the inside of this ear. I can click here, press Control, and then do some paths along the outside. Then I can mark a seam and use this seam temporarily just for link selection. So I can press L, then if I change it to seam, it's selecting the inside of the ear. Creating temporary seams is something you can do, and link selection also works with materials. So if you have something where the materials are all colored in, it looks nice, then you can click Material, link selection to the material. Wonderful. The other one is Control I, inverting the selection. I need to do that so often, so often, because there's often a situation where I want one part to do something and then the rest to do something else. So Control I to invert the selection. One of those shortcuts that I think is very useful. Okay, and then the next shortcut is more or less. You can press Control and then number pad plus or minus. And as you can see, as I'm doing that, it's increasing the selection by one round of vertices. That's super nice to be able to do that. You can do that as well in the menu, but it's like a menu, find it in the menu, slide over a menu, find it. It's too slow. So I like to do the shortcut. So those are all the selection tools with shortcuts that I use, and there are some, even though there's not a shortcut, I still go through the menu because it's worth it. So let me show you that. Okay, so this first one, let's say I have this cylinder and I want to make it into a gear. And to make a gear, you want like every other one to be selected. So that is where I use this checker deselect. And then the checker deselect selected every other one. You can even change it so that there's like more deselected. So it'll deselect and select, deselect and select. It's literally so easy. This one looks a little bit janky, but you get the idea. Okay, and the next one that I think is useful even if I have to go into the menu to do it is this select all by trait, faces by sides. And so this will help me find all the faces that are triangles or n-gons, and so I can see where those areas are and see if it's a problem. So I can find all of them at once. So if I want to find all the triangles on this monkey, I can do that. If I want to find all the ones with 5 or more, I can see, oh, this monkey doesn't have any more 5 or more. So I use this selection not because I want to select them, but literally just to find stuff. And I think that's pretty helpful. Okay, so that's the select menu. Let's go into the rest of these menus here. So the first one that I like to use is the mesh menu. And in the mesh menu, there's this transform thing and transform to sphere. I love that. So cool to be able to take something and turn it more round, like more like a sphere. Pretty nice. Aside from that, the only thing I use in the mesh menu is the normals thing. Now to see the normals, you gotta go to the overlays over here and you gotta turn it on, face orientation. But like if something got flipped around like this, then there's a couple things in the mesh menu that I use. So I select everything, go to mesh, and normals, you can recalculate outside, it'll fix it, or you can select specific faces and flip them around with the flip. And sometimes I use the shading stuff, but I don't really need that shit. Vertex menu, I don't use any of this shit. I don't use it. Edge menu, I used to use this, but now I don't. So I used to use this one that would bridge the loops. So if I had two like circles and I wanted to connect them, I would go and bridge the edge loops. I don't use that anymore, and that is because if you go to Edit, Preferences, and you go to your add-on, and search for Loop Tools. And in Loop Tools, you turn it on here. It's already in Blender. It should already be in there. You have all these options. And I think the Bridge tool and the Loop tools is better. You click it, and then you get the same thing, but you get to increase segments, and you get to twist it around. There's like more options, and it's easier accessible. You don't have to go up here and then find it in this sea of words. You just go to the Edit menu here on the right, and then you have all these options. Now, speaking of those options, I also use some other options in there. So I use circle too. So what circle does is I can select with control and select like a circle of edges. If I click circle, it literally turns it into a circle, which is so useful. Because now, if I select everything inside the circle, I can do all kinds of things with that. I can extrude it out, and now I have good geometry cylinder in a cylinder. Wonderful. So useful. Those are the two I use. I just use bridge and circle. The rest I think is good, but I don't use it. Wait, and then here's the face menu. The only one I use in the face menu is the grid fill. I like the grid fill. But if I were to like select this and I want to take this circle and make it into a nice geometry fill. Go to face, go to grid fill, and it creates nice quads, lovely, and you can just adjust the offset so that it lines up nice. And then all of a sudden you have a cylinder which is created of quads. So I use grid fill. Okay, so then there's this thing, which is the transform orientations. I don't really change this. I don't see the point in changing it. I think it's good sometimes, but I just don't personally need that. But this next one, transform pivot point, these are very helpful. So by default, it's by a median point. And what that means is it will take the selection, it will average where the selection's middle is, and that's where the transform will be. But something that you can do is change that. I use this one a lot, individual origins. And so let's say I had a bunch of faces and I wanted them to all extrude. So if I had that at median point, the extrude is all for all of them going in one direction. And so that's no good. Instead, I can change it to individual origins and look at all the lines. It's so beautiful. All the extrudes will go based on the individual origin. So each selection is treated as separate. So each box is taking the middle of that box and then it's extruding from that. So super good for individual origins. And I also use the 3D cursor sometimes. So let's say the 3D cursor is down here and I want it to scale not from the center, but I want it to go up too. And I can do this kind of thing. So it's really nice sometimes to be able to place the 3D cursor somewhere to get some cool effects. Now, another thing that I do, I use snapping. So I can snap to a vertex. And the way that this works is when you move and you hover a vertex, it will like literally take your whole selection and snap it to where the vertex is. Now, the thing I like to do is I press GX. So I move it in one axis, and then I can still snap to the vertex. So I can make this cylinder as long as these weird arches things. And then there's proportional editing. I use proportional editing all the time. There's a couple things to know. So there's these different shapes that the proportional editing will take. So by default, it's on smooth. So it will make like a normal thing. Sometimes I like to change it to sphere. Sphere is really nice. It'll make like a more round top. And sharp is pretty nice too. That's pretty cool. Now, a couple things to note with proportional editing is there's this thing connected only. So let's say I have two of these and I want to affect one of them but not the other. So I'm going to take this one and I'm going to move this point up, and you'll notice it's only affecting the one on the left. And that's because I have connected only on. If I turn that off, it's like messing with the one on the right, and maybe I don't want that. So connected only is pretty helpful. It's almost like working like a link selection, where there are points and edges connecting it. That's where the proportional editing will be applied. This one I don't use very often, projected from view, but it's still good because let's say I want to move this up now, like this. If it's projected from view, you'll see that it's not falling off with the way that the camera was looking. So it like pretends that that axis doesn't exist. So it like creates this shape, just flat. I don't end up using it, but it is really nice to know that it's there. Okay, last one is the modifiers. So I'm going to go through 3 modifiers, the 3 ones that I think are the most helpful. The first one is the mirror modifier. And I could just kind of skip it because everybody kind of knows about the mirror modifier. But I wanted to talk about it for a couple of reasons because there's some options in here that are super helpful. So here I have a mirror modifier set up, right? I cut it in half with a loop cut and then I made a mirror. Now the first thing I want to talk about is clipping. So clipping is really good because there are so often points where when I'm modeling with a mirror, and I want to move it away from the midline. So I'll do this. But then it becomes all janky because the left side and the right side aren't mirroring up. With clipping on, when you move points inwards, snap to the middle, and you can't move past it. So it's really nice for making sure that your points line up in the center. That's why I like turning clipping on sometimes. And then there's these other situations, like let me get a monkey in here. Then I have the monkey, and let's say that the monkey didn't have any eyes, and I wanted to add my own eyes. Then what I can do is I can add a mirror modifier. And this option mirror object allows me to mirror relative to like a head. And so that's super useful for creating eyes. So I do use that as well. So mirror object is also pretty helpful. It makes it super easy to line things up. The other modifier I want to talk about is array modifier. Super nice. And you might be confused, like why would you want to talk about array modifier? It's just making copies, right? The thing with it is, it's not just making copies. It's got this thing called object offset. So you turn on the object offset and then you can make it empty, put it in there, and then you can set the object offset to the empty. And what that allows you to do is instead of copying in a straight line, which is what most people think the array modifier is only good for, you can now copy rotationally too. So I made 5 copies. So I want to rotate my empty 72 degrees, which is 360 divided by 5. Now my copies line up perfectly with each other in a circle. Now when I go to edit, I can do these transformations and it will create like these kind of like mesmerizing, ooh, you see? It's so cool. So it's really nice to be able to have rotational symmetry for things like architecture and other things like that. And unlike the mirror modifier, I'm not restricted to 2 or 4 rotational symmetries. I can have 5, 7, however many I want. All I have to do is rotate the empty to the right degrees in the Z. The last one I want to talk about is subdivision surface modifier. Now, a lot of people use subdivision surface modifier and they use it to model. I do not like this. This thing on cage, it's like nice, right? Like you look at it, it's like, oh, look, I can transform the mesh and everything changes along with it. I personally think, especially if you're a beginner, turn this off because it's more understanding 3D form if you do it with the cage off because you can see the outside, what you're doing and what it's resulting in on the inside. So I think it's a lot more good for learning if you do with the cage off. That's my personal opinion. The idea with the subdivision surface modifier is you can create these big, non-complicated shapes, and inside it will make it complicated and rounded and smooth for you. So the only reason I wanted to talk about the subdivision surface modifier is to tell you that if you're a beginner, I think turning cage off is good because it will give you a better idea of 3D form in your learning to have these like big blocky shapes that you can transform and see how it results in the inside. So if you turn on the on cage, it's less obvious what's happening. Like if I turn the cage off again, look at how crazy I moved these points and I didn't even realize. Whereas if I had the cage off, I can achieve like the same kind of result, but my geometry, that's actual geometry, is not getting messed up. Hope this video helped you, and let me know in the comments if there's something I missed, something that you think is really helpful, or what you want me to do next. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.